On a crisp Saturday morning, Jane felt a flicker of hope, however brief, that the world wasn't as harsh as it often seemed. The sunlight bathed the row of towering pine trees lining the sleepy street in Briar Ridge, a peaceful neighborhood in Oregon. The air had a scent of dew-covered grass and blooming lilacs, mixing with the rhythmic sound of sprinklers sprinkling in the distance. Birds trilled in the trees, and a neighbor's lawnmower hummed softly in the background, adding to the tranquil noise. On her driveway, her 7-year-old daughter Lily crouched, absorbed in her work, holding a piece of chalk in her tiny fingers. She was carefully drawing a massive, smiling dinosaur on the concrete. Jane stood on the porch, cradling a warm cup of coffee in her hands, dressed in faded jeans and a loose sweatshirt, her hair still damp from the shower. To the outside world, she seemed like an ordinary single mom enjoying the calm of a weekend morning. But inside, there was a different version of Jane, a woman trained in the art of discipline, resilience, and strategic thinking. Years ago, she had been an elite combat trainer, preparing soldiers for high-stakes missions. But that was a chapter she thought she had closed. Lily hummed a quiet tune as she added more details to her dinosaur drawing. Occasionally, she paused to announce which dinosaur she was drawing. Jane smiled to herself, watching her daughter. In a world that often felt like it was spinning out of control, Lily was the reason Jane still had faith in anything. Then came a sound, not loud, but unsettling, just the low growl of an engine. Jane's instincts prickled, her smile faltering as she listened. The vehicle was approaching slowly, not with the aimless drift of a neighbor, but with the predatory precision of something stalking its prey. The SUV pulled into view, a sleek, black vehicle, new and polished, with tinted windows and no license plates. It stopped directly in front of their house. Jane's grip on the coffee mug tightened, and her heart rate quickened. Lily, completely unaware, continued her drawing. Two men emerged from the SUV. They were dressed in dark blue uniforms that resembled police gear, but with no insignia, no badges, no real identifiers. The patches on their sleeves read Community Enforcement. Their utility belts held strange devices that looked like radios, and each had a small, handheld baton. They weren't official, but they exuded an unsettling air of authority. Jane set the mug down on the porch railing and slowly walked down the steps, positioning herself protectively between Lily and the men. The taller of the two, a burly man with a square jaw and mirrored sunglasses, stepped forward and spoke in a clipped tone. This property is in violation of City Ordinance 9G. Unauthorized markings on the driveway, he announced, his eyes scanning the area like a hawk. Jane's brow furrowed. There's no such ordinance, she replied. What city are you even talking about? The second man, shorter and stockier, with a smug expression, pointed toward Lily's drawing with his clipboard. Graffiti, he said dismissively. We're enforcing compliance. Step aside, ma'am. Jane's eyes narrowed, her protective instincts kicking in. That's sidewalk chalk, she said, her voice firm. It washes off with water, and you're not even with the real city enforcement. Even if you were, you don't touch my daughter. The shorter man didn't acknowledge her. He took a step toward Lily, his hand reaching for her. Jane's stomach dropped. Lily, she called, but the girl, confused, turned toward the man just as he grabbed her by the wrist. Get your hands off her. Jane's voice cut through the air, low, commanding, and full of years of training. The man turned to face her, his eyes hardening. Step back, lady, or you'll be charged with obstruction, he warned, but Jane was already moving. Her body tensed as she closed the gap, her mind calculating the next move. She was already too far from Lily to stop the man from pulling her toward the SUV, but she wasn't going to let him go easily. Behind her, Jane's father, Greg, who had been silent until now, pressed a button on his phone and spoke one word into his earpiece. Now! The events that followed unfolded in mere seconds, but would be replayed in the neighborhood for days, dissected on social media, and debated across the country. But to Jane, it wasn't a spectacle. It was a battle, and she was determined to win. The taller officer, still by the SUV, suddenly jerked backward, collapsing to the ground with a grunt as a gloved hand latched onto his neck in a chokehold. He struggled, but was dragged out of sight behind the hedges. The shorter officer froze, his grip on Lily's arm loosening slightly. Lily twisted away, and before the man could react, Jane charged at him, slamming into him with her shoulder and knocking the air from his lungs. He staggered back, and she swept his legs from under him, slamming him hard onto the concrete. Lily stumbled backward into Greg's arms. He hugged her tightly, whispering for her to stay calm and keep her eyes shut. Jane quickly pinned the man to the ground, her knee on his arm, her voice cold as steel. "You've just made the biggest mistake of your life," she hissed. The quiet suburban street had erupted into chaos. Neighbors were peeking out from behind their windows, and a few had their phones up, recording the scene. From across the street, Mrs. Ramirez had already dialed 911, her voice shaking with fury. "What's happening?" someone shouted. "Did they try to take a kid? Is that Jane? Oh my God, is he bleeding?" The man under Jane groaned. "We were just doing our job." "No," she spat. "You were pretending to be something you're not, and you laid hands on my daughter." She stood slowly, her breath steady as sirens grew louder, approaching fast. "Lily, are you all right?" she asked, her voice soft now. Lily, clutching her plush dinosaur, nodded, her lip trembling. "They said I was in trouble for my drawing," she whispered. Jane gave her a warm smile and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Sweetheart, you're not in trouble. You made the best dinosaur I've ever seen." The man beneath her groaned again, and Jane looked down at him with a look of disgust. "You messed with the wrong mother." Behind her, Greg emerged from the backyard, his hands wiping the dirt off his gardening gloves. He casually walked over to the man, who was now zip-tied and lying beside a tipped-over lawn chair. "They're both secure," Greg said, nodding toward Jane. Jane smirked. "I figured you'd handle that." The man on the ground whimpered again. "You really don't understand who you're dealing with," Greg said, his tone cold as he bent down to examine the man further. Jane crossed her arms, her gaze steady on the black SUV, its windows tinted and no license plates. Every detail was calculated. This wasn't a random act. "Marcus," she said, her voice tight, "what were they planning?" "They've done this before," Greg said. They were expecting fear. They got fury. More neighbors came outside, some in disbelief, others recording the scene in silence. "What kind of scam is this?" Greg asked the man on the ground. "Snatch a kid, scare the parents, extort money? Or is it something worse?" The man didn't answer, his eyes darting nervously. Jane leaned in closer. "You might want to talk now. When the Real police arrive, you'll have a better chance of cutting a deal. But only if you tell them everything." 2 squad cars arrived, and Officer Lee stepped out, demanding answers. Jane explained the attempted abduction by fake officials, and Greg revealed his training with the force. The imposter officers were arrested. Jane's daughter was safe, and a viral video became a symbol of defiance, justice beginning on her doorstep.